My name is Naomi Tran. I'm 19. Second-year architecture student. Half Vietnamese, half invisible, at least in my family's eyes. I used to draw homes I could never live in. Places filled with light, silence that felt warm, not weaponized. But the blueprint I was born into, it didn't have room for mistakes. And according to my father, I just made the biggest one. I was 5 weeks pregnant the day I told him. It was raining. The kind of rain that soaks through your coat and your courage. I sat across from him at the kitchen table, fingers clenched around the ultrasound referral. My stepmother Myra stirred soup behind us, pretending not to listen. My little brother Ethan played violin upstairs, his sound flawless like always. I took a breath, and I told him. His spoon hit the table before the words even settled. "You're keeping it," he said, voice flat, not "who's the father." "Not are you okay?" Just that, I nodded. "You want to destroy your life because of one mistake." "It's not a mistake," I whispered. He stood up. I stood too. Then he said it. The sentence that would redraw the map of my life. "Then you are no longer my daughter." I didn't cry, not until he ripped the paper from my hand. Not until he tore the scholarship letter I worked 2 years for. Myra didn't say a word, just leaned against the sink and said coldly, "Guess we don't have to save for med school anymore." I packed that night. Not suitcases, just my sketchpad, 3 shirts, a hoodie, and my mother's ring. The one thing she left behind before cancer took her and silence replaced her place. No one walked me to the door. No one asked if I had somewhere to go. They just turned the lights off. I slept on the floor of the design studio that first night. Hard concrete, fluorescents buzzing. I wrapped myself in leftover tracing paper like a ghost of plans that would never be built. I ate crackers I found in my bag. I drank water from the sink in the washroom. By day 3, I smelled like ink and failure. My phone was at 4%, and so was I. Then he showed up. Professor Eli Ramos, mid-40s, sharp eyes, slight limp. Known for being the hardest professor in our department and the only one who didn't let students get away with mediocrity. He found me curled under a desk with my sketchpad pressed to my chest. Didn't yell. Didn't scold. Just stood there for a second and asked, "You designing something or hiding from something?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. He sat down beside me, crossed his legs, and pulled out a protein bar, offered it without words. I nodded. Took it, ate like it was the first thing I'd had in days. It probably was. After a long silence, he said, "I'm not here to report you. I'm here because I've slept in studios too." That night, he drove me to his workshop, a dusty, 2-floor studio he hadn't used in years. He opened the attic, flicked on a small lamp. Air smelled like wood shavings and coffee long gone cold. There was a cot, a desk, a stack of architecture books from another lifetime. "This is temporary," he said, "but better than floor tile." I looked at him, really looked. He had that kind of stillness you only see in people who have lost something they never talk about. He didn't ask me anything that night, just handed me a blanket and went downstairs. I didn't sleep much, but for the first time in days I felt safe and hungry for more than food, for a new design, a new structure. One where I wasn't discarded for choosing life. One where I wasn't defined by the blueprint someone else drew for me. That was the night I stopped asking to be let in and started planning to build something they could never enter. Not revenge, not rage, just space. Sacred, quiet, mine, and maybe, just maybe, his too. The attic creaked at dawn. Sunlight bled through slats in the wooden blinds, painting the walls in golden geometry. I hadn't slept, not really. But I'd drawn 3 pages. One of a tiny home with a fold-out crib, one of a window facing east because I needed light, and one of a space labeled safe. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Downstairs, the smell of burnt toast and black coffee dragged me out of bed. Eli was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, hunched over a stack of old blueprints. He didn't look up, just said, "You snore quieter than most students." Bonus point. I smirked first time in days. He pushed a mug toward me. No questions, no lectures, just caffeine and presence. That became our rhythm. Mornings started early. Eli worked on old renovation plans. He used to run a firm before his wife passed. I swept floors, organized books, logged files into an ancient desktop that wheezed with each click. He called me intern. But when he thought I wasn't looking, he'd leave printouts of design competitions on my desk. One was circled in red: Urban Hope Shelter Project deadline, 6 weeks. Design a mobile shelter for displaced youth. I stared at it for an hour, then started sketching. Tiny homes with rotating solar panels. Insulation made from recycled denim. I hadn't felt this alive in months. Evenings were quieter. Eli would sit by the big window, polishing old drafting tools. I'd be across the room, tracing my baby's development week by week onto graph paper. Sometimes we talked about buildings, lines, and why good design had to feel like a hug. One night I asked, "Why'd you stop building?" He paused, then quietly said, "I built hospitals. My daughter died in one. I couldn't draw walls that couldn't save her." I didn't say anything, just set my pen down and sat closer. Sometimes silence is more architectural than words. The weeks blurred into blueprints and prenatal appointments. Eli drove me to everyone, waited outside with a book and a thermos, never hovered, never judged. He started calling the baby Peanut, and left vitamin gummies on my desk every morning like clockwork. No notes, just care. One morning I found a gift. A small, square box wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a pocket compass. Old, worn, heavy, engraved on the back, "Always know your true north." It was my daughter S, he said, not meeting my eyes. "Now it's yours." I swallowed hard. Words got stuck somewhere behind gratitude and grief. All I could do was nod and mean it. 3 weeks before the shelter deadline, I fainted during a sketch session. Overwork. Low blood sugar. Hormones. I woke up on the couch, a cool rag on my forehead, Eli pacing. "You're not a blueprint," he muttered. "You don't get to be perfect. You just get to be here." That was the moment something shifted. Not loud, not romantic, but tectonic. He cared, not because he had to, because he chose to. The final week before submission, we worked side by side. Drafting, reviewing. Eli didn't touch my design, but he asked questions that sharpened it. What does this space feel like? Where does the person cry? Where do they exhale? I'd never been taught like that, not just how to build, but why. I submitted at 3 a.m. Then cried over pancakes we made in a cast iron skillet older than both of us combined. The next day, we walked to the community park. I couldn't walk far anymore, baby bump heavy, ankles swelling. We sat on a bench under a jacaranda tree, petals falling like soft confetti. Eli looked out over the pond and said, "When she comes, everything changes." I smiled, one hand on my belly. "It already has." He looked at me then, longer than usual, not like a student, not like a problem to fix. "You're going to be a better architect than I ever was." I shook my head. "Only because you reminded me I could still build." He didn't touch me, didn't need to. The air between us was already full. Of blueprints, of grief, of becoming. That night I wrote in my journal, "He's not my family, but he made space like one. Maybe love isn't lightning. Maybe it's scaffolding, quiet, steady, holding you until you can hold yourself." And I didn't know it yet. But the foundation we poured in those weeks, through ink, silence, and second chances, wasn't just for me. It was for all 3 of us. The storm came earlier than forecast. They said light snow. What we got was a whiteout. Mid-December, wind howling like it had something to prove. The power flickered twice that evening at the studio. Eli lit candles, checked the windows, and muttered, "Welcome to Chicago's annual mood swing." I was 8.5 months pregnant, swollen ankles. Braxton Hicks every few hours, still working on mock-ups for our mobile shelter pitch. Because even when you're carrying a human inside you, deadlines don't care, neither do contractions. It started at 11:17 p.m. A deep cramp, low and pulsing. I tried to ignore it. But the second one hit like an earthquake in my spine. I stood up, and my water broke. "Eli," I whispered, gripping the table. He turned, took one look at the puddle on the floor, and dropped his mug mid-sip. "Tell me that's not what I think it is." "I need a hospital." "You need a miracle," he said, grabbing his coat. We're snowed in. We tried the car. Snow blocked the garage door. Called 911. No lines, tried neighbors. No answer. For 5 long seconds, we just stared at each other. Then Eli inhaled sharply, nodded once, and said, "Okay, I've delivered blueprints, not babies, but we're not waiting." We moved to the attic. He boiled water, laid towels, pulled out every flashlight, pillow, and prayer we had. I screamed through the night, cried through the fear, breathed through the contractions while Eli whispered steady, "You're not alone, you've done harder things." At 4:12 a.m., under a power outage and the weak light of a desk lamp, I brought Solene Hope Tran into the world. Her first cry was raw, fierce, like she'd inherited all my buried voice. Eli held her in trembling hands, eyes wide. Silent, then he exhaled. "She's perfect, Naomi, she's perfect." He handed her to me, wrapped in a faded blue towel. The same one I once used to mop up spilled coffee and self-doubt. I looked at her. 10 fingers, 10 toes. The softest wisp of black hair, and I wept, not from pain, not from exhaustion, but from the overwhelming truth that she was mine, and I was hers. We didn't sleep that day. The storm passed, but something stayed. A shift, not loud, but certain. Eli cooked oatmeal with honey for my recovery. He washed Solene's first blanket by hand. He built a tiny crib from leftover birch plywood scraps. He didn't call it love, but I felt it in every quiet action, every moment he didn't leave. A week later, a letter arrived. I thought it was a bill. It was an award. Our shelter project won first place. A nonprofit wanted to fund the prototype. They wanted me, a single mom with no degree yet, to lead the design team. I stared at the letter, then at Solene, gurgling in her little bassinet, and then at Eli. He raised an eyebrow. "Well, Architect Tran, let's build something impossible." I named the business Hearth and Home, a studio for dignified healing spaces, especially for young mothers. Eli joined me part-time, doing what he called architectural babysitting while I worked. We built more than models. We built routine. 6 a.m. feedings, 9 a.m. design calls, 1 p.m. diaper blowouts, 3 p.m. lullabies with drafting tools clinking in the background. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. People asked if Eli was Solene's father. At first, I'd laugh. Say, no, just the guy who built her crib and held my hand through contractions. But over time, I stopped correcting them, because something unspoken had begun to settle. Not lust, not infatuation, but that slow, sacred kind of love that sneaks in while no one's looking. He never kissed me, never crossed a line. But his eyes, they stayed longer, softer, wider every time he saw me carry Solene into a room. One night, I came downstairs after putting Solene to bed. Eli was on the porch, wrapped in a worn flannel jacket, sipping tea. I joined him. Silent stars, then I whispered, "Do you ever wonder what your daughter would have become?" He nodded, every day, but I stopped asking why I lost her the moment I met Solene. I turned, he wasn't looking at the sky anymore. He was looking at me, and I asked, "Me. What do you want to become?" He took a long sip, then placed his cup down, and said something that made my heart forget how to beat. "Yours, if you'll let me." I didn't answer with words. I just leaned my head on his shoulder and felt the scaffolding hold. That night, I journaled one sentence. Sometimes, rejection plants you in the soil you were always meant to grow from. And this was only the beginning. It was a Wednesday afternoon. The bakery downstairs smelled like cinnamon and almond glaze. Solene was napping upstairs, one arm flopped over her plush giraffe. Eli was in the courtyard, pruning a vine he refused to admit he loved. And I was reviewing final blueprints for a women's shelter in Southside. The bell above the door chimed. I didn't look up right away. Customers were normal. Traffic was good. The scent of new life had a way of drawing people in. But then I heard his voice. "Naomi." It wasn't a question. It was hesitation disguised as familiarity. And just like that, my body went cold. I turned and saw them. My father. His hair grayer, eyes sunken. Still in that stiff navy coat he always wore to church. Behind him, Myra, clutching her bag like it might shield her from judgment. And Ethan, no longer a boy, taller now, still perfect, still spotless. I didn't move, didn't blink. Just set my pen down and said, "We're closed." My father stepped forward. His voice cracked, more from age than remorse. "Please, I know we're the last people you want to see." "Then why are you here?" I asked. Even he paused. Looked at Myra, then back at me. "We need help." "No kidding." He exhaled. "Our house, it's being foreclosed. The business failed. Ethan's scholarship didn't cover everything. Myra, she's been sick. And we need someone to co-sign a refinancing plan. They won't approve us alone. But if the deed is in your name." I laughed, not bitter, just exhausted. "You want me to save the house you threw me out of?" "And Naomi, you told me I wasn't your daughter." I was angry, I was scared. "No, you were cruel and deliberate." Myra finally spoke. Soft, thin. "You don't understand the pressure we were under, the shame, the judgment." I stepped around the counter. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You watched your husband throw a pregnant girl onto the street. You said nothing. You never even called to ask if I was alive. Do you know how I gave birth?" Their silence was answer enough. During a snowstorm, in an attic, on a pile of towels, with no heat, no doctor, just me and the man who never gave up on me. My father's hands trembled. "I live with that shame every day." "Good," I said, "because I lived with yours for far too long." Then came the voice that cut through everything. "Mommy." Soline, barefoot, sleepy-eyed, hugging her giraffe, standing at the top of the stairs. Eli behind her, watching silently. I walked to her, picked her up, held her close. She looked over my shoulder and asked, "Who are those people?" I didn't flinch. "No one important, baby, just strangers." I turned back to them. "You didn't want her. You told me she would ruin my life. You erased us from your future. So don't you dare try to re-enter ours now that you've run out of options." Myra looked like she might speak again. I raised a hand. "Don't. Not unless the next word out of your mouth is, 'I'm sorry.' And even then, it won't change a thing." Ethan finally opened his mouth. "I didn't know it was that bad." "You didn't want to know." He looked down. "What do we do now?" My father whispered. I looked at Soline, at her soft hair, her steady heartbeat against mine, then back at them. "You go home, whatever home you have left, and you sit in it, and you think about the daughter you could have had, the granddaughter you will never know." They didn't argue, didn't plead. They left, quietly, like shadows retreating from light. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I made grilled cheese with Soline. Eli played soft jazz on the radio. And when Soline fell asleep in my lap, Eli knelt beside me. He placed a small box in my hand, wooden, hand-carved, inside. A ring, simple, silver, inscribed inside. "We build what they burned." I know I'm not young. I know I'm not perfect, but Naomi, if you'll have me, I want to spend whatever time I've got left building with you. My breath caught, my heart didn't race, it settled. Like a foundation done right, I looked at him. At the man who saw me when I was rubble. At the father figure who became the partner. At the man Soline already called Daddy. Yes. That night I wrote, "Revenge is a locked door. Healing is never needing to open it again." We didn't have a big wedding. No aisle, no organ, no white doves. Just 3 folding chairs, a judge with warm eyes, and Soline throwing petals in random directions. She wore a yellow dress with sunflowers. Eli wore a suit that didn't quite fit, but still made him look like home. I wore a blazer and flats, because my heels were still stained with the places I'd walked through. We said vows under the arch of our own building. The same studio where my water broke, where Soline was born, where everything began again. "I vow to never design without heart," I said, "and to never love without choice." Eli smiled, eyes glinting. "I vow to build with you every day. In drywall, in dishes, in doubt. Even when the walls crack, we patch them together." Soline clapped before the judge could say, "You may kiss the bride." So we laughed, kissed anyway, and danced in a circle of sunlight. 3 years later, the sign above the studio now reads, "Hearth and Home Architecture, SPACES for the Invisible." Inside, a wall covered with Polaroids, single mothers with newborns, survivors of domestic violence holding keys to their first safe apartment. Runaway teens in sleeping pods they helped design. Our team grew. Former clients became interns. Clients became partners. Every blueprint bore the stamp. Designed by those who have lived without. Eli took over workshop mentoring. He calls it building futures, one bent nail at a time. Solene now draws next to me at the drafting table. Her sketches are chaotic but bold. She once drew a treehouse with a kitchen, a spaceship dock, and 3 bathrooms. "In case we ever feel messy," she said. I framed it. Put it next to my first winning shelter design, because both were survival, and both were sacred. I don't talk about my father anymore. Not out of spite, out of peace. We never reconnected. I never returned his messages. Not because I'm bitter, but because I'm busy. Busy building what he never believed I could. I kept the house. Not physically, but in memory, the cold kitchen, the slammed door. I turned it into something useful, a module in my design class, Spatial Rejection, How Architecture Echoes Power. Students love it. They say it's personal. It is. One evening, I sat on the porch with Eli. Solene asleep upstairs, jazz playing softly, the city humming below us. I asked, "Do you ever regret not having more normal?" He chuckled. "What's normal? Beige walls and polite dysfunction. Some people want that. We made better." I leaned on his shoulder, his heartbeat steady. We made healing. Solene started kindergarten this year. On the first day, she wore a backpack twice her size, held both our hands, and declared, "I'm going to tell people my mommy builds houses out of hugs." She waved goodbye at the classroom door. I didn't cry until we got back to the car. Eli handed me a tissue before I even asked, "You okay?" "I'm not just okay," I whispered. "I'm free." That night, I wrote in my journal something I hadn't done in months. They called me a mistake. They called her a burden. But we became a blueprint, a new kind. Built from grace, not guilt. We didn't just survive what they did. We transformed it. And every nail, every wall, every quiet Sunday morning is proof that you can be both broken and the builder. So when people ask me now, "How did you do it? How did you go from abandoned to architect?" I smile and I tell them, I didn't rebuild what they broke. I built something they could never enter.